Ludwig van Beethoven, I mean, the name itself is just massive, right? A pillar of Western culture. For 200 years, we've celebrated him as this total revolutionary genius. So, what happens when a new generation of rebels looks at a guy like Beethoven and decides the best way to honor him is to tear his legacy to pieces?
Just take a look at this. It's a room from a West German film made back in 1970, where literally everything, the piano, the chair, the walls, is just plastered with Beethoven's sheet music. It's this weird mix of total obsession and, well, total deconstruction. And it perfectly captures the strange, provocative vibe of that whole era. And that really gets to the core mystery here. Why would these avant-garde artists, pioneers in their own right, feel this need to shred and distort and scramble the work of a composer everyone agrees is a master? What could possibly be the motivation for this kind of artistic attack? To get it, we have to go back to 1970. It was the 200th anniversary of Beethoven's birth. And all across West Germany, you had these big official celebrations going on. But just under the surface, a very, very different kind of tribute was starting to take shape.
And this wasn't just one guy. It was a whole crew of really prominent composers, all marking the anniversary in these super unconventional ways. You had Mauricio Kegel, who imagined instruments like this piano, completely wrapped in scores. Then there was Karlheinz Stockhausen, who warped Beethoven's music until it sounded like it was coming through a crackly shortwave radio. Wilhelm Dieter Siebert literally took scissors to a famous sonata, just chopped it up and rearranged the pieces. And Giuseppe Chiari pretty much drowned the Moonlight Sonata in this wave of distorted sound.
The effect was totally intentional and, shocking. As one person put it, these pieces gave us a Beethoven torn apart and alienated. But to really understand just how radical this was, we first have to remember who and what they were tearing apart. You see, before Beethoven was a monument, he was a musical bomb thrower. The guy didn't just write music, he shattered the rules of what music could even be. And there is no better example of his revolutionary spirit than his legendary Ninth Symphony. Think about how a symphony usually starts, right? With some big, clear melody. That is not what Beethoven gives us in the Ninth. It opens with this vague, shimmering sound. As a listener, you're kind of lost. There's no clear melody, no obvious key to grab onto. It's just this hazy, chaotic atmosphere. For the first 14 bars, the score just calls for two notes, A and E, played really quietly by the strings. This creates this incredible tension and ambiguity. You have no idea where you are or where you're headed. For its time, this was absolutely revolutionary. Now, this wasn't just some technical trick. Beethoven was a storyteller. That opening was designed to musically paint a picture of a situation full of despair. He was using the entire orchestra to create a feeling of struggle and darkness right from the very first note. And he didn't stop there. He completely swapped the traditional order of the movements, putting the fast, energetic parts second instead of third. He threw in rhythms from a common Austrian folk waltz. And get this, he gave the timpani, the big kettle drums, a solo melody, something that had never ever been done before. He was a true innovator. But the biggest shock, the most radical break with tradition, came at the very end. See, the symphony wasn't just about despair. It was about the journey out of that despair. In the final movement, Beethoven did something that was just unheard of. He brought in human voices, a full choir and soloist, singing Friedrich Schiller's poem, Ode to Joy. A symphony was supposed to be purely instrumental, but Beethoven just shattered that convention to get his message across. And the way he introduces that famous Ode to Joy melody is a story all by itself. It starts out quiet, way down in the cellos and basses. Then it slowly builds, rising up through the different sections of the orchestra, getting more and more powerful until it finally just erupts with the full choir. It's a musical picture of humanity's journey from darkness to light, from struggle to brotherhood. So here's the central conflict. On the one hand, you've got Beethoven the innovator, the rebel who broke the rules, who depicted real human struggle, who gave a voice to this grand vision for humanity. But over time, that same rebel became an institution. He became a sacred cow, a symbol of holy tradition, and this towering figure of cultural authority. So on the left, you have the revered, pristine score, and on the right, that same score, chopped up, repurposed, covering a piece of furniture. The revolutionary work had become a dusty cultural artifact, and by the late 1960s, a new generation of rebels decided it was time to smash it.
But why did these artists feel such a powerful need to deconstruct Beethoven? The answer isn't in the music hall. It's in the explosive social and political climate of West Germany in the late 1960s.
The whole spirit of 1968 was sweeping across Europe, and West Germany was a real hotbed. A new leftist spirit was fueling these massive student protests against what they saw as a corrupt, rigid, and deeply conservative establishment.
A key idea driving this whole movement was this concept of the authoritarian personality. It was developed by scholars who had actually fled Nazi Germany, and it argued that a repressive, hierarchical upbringing could create people who are submissive to authority and susceptible to fascist ideas. And the student protesters, well, they started seeing this personality type everywhere in post-war German society. Their critique targeted everything they saw as authoritarian: rigid social hierarchies, stuffy dress codes, even the formal ways people greeted each other. And this critique extended right into the world of classical music. They looked at the orchestra conductor, standing on a podium, waving a baton, and saw the ultimate authoritarian figure. And the classical canon, this collection of great masters, was seen as just another form of unquestionable authority.
And this is where our two stories collide. The anti-authoritarian political revolt found its perfect target in the world of art.
It all really came down to this. If you want to challenge the authority of the entire classical music establishment, who do you go after? You target the biggest, most revered symbol of that establishment. You go after Beethoven. In their eyes, he wasn't a rebel anymore. He was the canon. He was the authority. The goal, as one critic put it so well, was to rescue Beethoven from his own legacy. It was an attempt to scratch off the gypsum and varnish, and washing away the layer of dirt of holy convention. They believed that by tearing the work apart, they could break that sacred image, and maybe, just maybe, find the real rebellious Beethoven underneath. And you can see this rebellious spirit right there in the titles. Instead of the formal Ludwig van Beethoven, Kegel's work was just Ludwig van, which you could even read as Ludwig van. Siebert's was Unser Ludwig, our Ludwig. This wasn't just being informal. In the stiff, formal culture of 1960s Germany, addressing a figure like Beethoven by his first name was a deliberate act of rejecting authority. And all that leaves us with a fascinating question to chew on. This conflict between the rebellious artists and the revered institution, it didn't end in 1970. So who are the Beethovens of today? What artists or works have become so monumental, so much a part of the establishment, that they've basically become sacred cows? And more importantly, who are the new rebels trying to tear them apart?